September 11 was devastating for obvious reasons of safety and security for all of us. If Muslims are indeed responsible for such a catastrophe, does this violence come from the faith? And if yes, what kind of a religion promotes attacking and killing innocent civilians?
My best friend Pete, his girlfriend worked in Tower 2. And I remember, she was telling the story about how she escaped. She got, the first plane hit the Tower 1, and then they started evacuating the second tower, so everyone was going down the stairs. And then they made an announcement saying everyone would go back to work. Well, since a lot of people had already gone down a lot of flights of stairs, they were waiting for the elevator to go back up. And I can't remember when the second plane hit, but it hit and she was able to get out. But I mean, my buddy, they were there. They were right there. So I remember we were talking on the phone like that day, and he told me, you should be careful because they're, it's like a mob mentality. They're lynching anyone that remotely looks Arab or Muslim.
I was living in Brooklyn and working in Manhattan for a construction company called R.C. Dahlner. I'd gotten into the office early, like I always did, around 7:30. That day he came up to me. I was in my cubicle and I was just having my coffee, and he said, a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. And we all thought it was just like a light aircraft or, something, just an accident. My boss was sitting in a conference room and they had CNN on. And CNN at that point didn't have the right angle on you could just see the smoke coming out of the tower. My boss said to me, go down, see what you can see. And so I went down onto Greenwich Avenue and I looked up, and from my vantage point on Greenwich Avenue, I could look right up to where the plane went in. And the building was on fire. It was pretty wild.
Found my friend, she was in the lobby. I said, something's going on, there's papers flying everywhere. Something is very wrong. My bedrooms had views of the World Trade Tower and the Statue of Liberty, and we went right to the bedroom windows, and there we saw the World Trade 1 tower on fire. We went in the other room right away, of course, to turn the TV on, to get the coverage, and then they said a plane had crashed into the trade tower. Then all of a sudden, the next one hit as we're watching out the window.
There was quite a crowd gathered by this time. There was a lot of stuff going on, people speculating, and as we were standing there, we saw the second plane come in and it hit the other tower. I saw the explosion and I was, wow, this is crazy.
It was just like reliving the train wreck all over again. And it was the train wreck where, people couldn't look away, but I chose to look away. I know it happened and I recognize the fact that it happened, but I just kind of took it and had the knowledge of it, but just tuned out the news and all of that because clearly it's going to be biased and there's going to be a lot of hatred and a lot of feelings going on. And one of the worst things that you can do is probably watch American television when something's going on.
I got my camera from my son's 6th birthday party, which had been a week before, and it was still, I only used a bit of the film, so I grabbed it was a Pentax and with film, pre-digital, and ran to the windows and started taking pictures. Children were still at school. At one point we said, the boys go to school in an Arab neighborhood. We started panicking, thinking that because on the news they were inferring that perhaps it was Osama bin Laden's doing, that because they were in an Arab neighborhood that they might be attacked in retaliation. We walked all the way to their school, which is probably 2 miles, close to downtown Brooklyn, right off Atlantic Avenue, which has big Arab stores, Arab meat shops, Sahadi's on the other end of Atlantic Avenue, my favorite shop. We signed them out. And we walked home, and as we walked home, papers everywhere and dust on everything, ashes, like Pompeii, covering all the cars and the streets, and it was primary day, and all the little street Businesses which were temporarily headquarters for local politicians were now handing out masks, the little carpenter's masks for people, so they wouldn't be breathing in people, essentially.
I ran back up into my office, and my boss said by this time they were saying there were other planes in the air, that they didn't know where they were going, where they were heading, and it was getting kind of scary. He said, we're under attack. My boss basically said, look, you're on your own, get home. That's what he said to us. I thought, well, I'll head to Canal Street and I'll go over the Brooklyn Bridge. That was the quickest way home. And we already knew the subways, everything had ground to a halt in New York City. The only way to get back home was either the Brooklyn Bridge or the Manhattan Bridge, and I was going to have to walk. I came down and I was on Greenwich Avenue again, and I was looking up and I saw the first tower fall down. And the people coming up were covered in dust and dirt and debris and that white pallor that everyone remembers from that day. And I got to Canal Street and there was the police had already cordoned it off and said, no, you can't come any further south. And I said, look, I'm just trying to get across the bridge. I just want to get home. I live in Brooklyn, I'm trying to get across the bridge. They said, no, go to the Manhattan Bridge, you'll get across. I walked towards the Manhattan Bridge and I could just walk straight. It was a straight shot, straight up canal. And I wasn't alone. I got onto the approach and the bridge was packed with humans leaving the city, and it was, you know, you see all these things when you're a kid, you watch all these history programs like The World at War, and you see refugees leaving en masse. And that's really how I felt that day.
All the cell phones were dead. I couldn't reach Rod. I couldn't reach my boss to say, look, I'm not coming in. I can't open this door until I know everyone is safe. So that didn't happen until around 2 when I finally went in and opened this door. When I did go in and she finally arrived, and I had been calling, like probably 30 times I'd called her, she basically yelled at me and said, if something like this ever happens again, which was rather shocking because I didn't see how anything like this could ever happen again. Rod came home. I believe the phone started working again, and I somehow got in touch with him, and he was safe after having walked over the Brooklyn Bridge. No, the Manhattan Bridge, because he couldn't get to the Brooklyn Bridge.
Like any society, we have our zealots and we have our fundamentalists who are opposed to anything that isn't what they adhere to and what they believe. Now, a lot of them embrace it and they love it and they take the most out of it, and they're modern and they're progressive, and they believe that this is the way society's going. This is the way that planet Earth is going. We are all destined eventually not to have these divisions amongst us.
I've read part of the Qur'an. I've read it so long ago, but I remember enough of it reading that I felt, without being influenced by anybody, I bought a paperback of it at a thrift store out of curiosity, that I felt it was a pretty anti-female religion, a pretty patriarchal, oppressive religion. But it's all open to interpretation, isn't it?
Pertaining not only to the question of whether Islam is a peaceful religion, but whether it is gender-biased religion. And these gender-biased religions, in their applications into laws, severely has affected the legal status of women in today's Iran and some other Islamic countries.
From my extensive traveling between Muslim nations and sitting through court cases, in particular in Iran, and hearing firsthand how the punishment for certain crimes is being implemented. I believe that majority of those interpretations are being used to really justify male chauvinistic patriarchal culture, Arabian culture in today's courtrooms. I do believe that some of the punishments are barbaric and very harsh, but as a lawyer I also look at the intention, and also as any lawyer in Western countries would think, what can you prove in court of law? And if we go with the very barbaric act of stoning as punishment for adultery, which is the highest criminal act, it fits into a category of criminal offenses of zina, which is its absolute highest standard of scrutiny, and review is required. For example, in Iran, that women have been stoned to death for adultery, we very easily can see that that highest standard of review was never met. If we look at during Taliban regime in Afghanistan, women were put to death for no reason at all. It is so ridiculous to try to fit it into adultery. Women were stoned to death or were executed because they had left the house on their own. Young children were put to death because they impersonated being a boy instead of a female, so they can go to work and earn a living, because they couldn't find a job, or they were not actually allowed to find a job if you're a female under Taliban regime. That man who have interpreted all these verses, they really wanted for women to be maintained and obeyed and stay at home.
There are a couple of passages that you go on boards, people that are anti-Muslim, they'll cite a couple of different passages in the Qur'an where it says to kill your enemy, or kill people that are against you. But if you look at the passage right before that or right after it, it always says, unless they don't want to fight you, or unless they give up, and then you can't attack them, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like the aggressors. So basically what it's saying, in my opinion, what it's saying is that if someone attacks you, you have every right to defend yourself. In the Quran it says that if they don't want to fight you, you can't fight them anymore. And if they go to you and say, well, we need your help or we need your protection, you have to protect them. So yeah, I think like the extremists that you see in the world conducting all this violence, they're more politically motivated than religiously motivated. Just like the Ku Klux Klan, they were Christian influenced. It's like a Christian flavor, like the difference between orange juice and orange drink. It's just flavored with that. But their motivation is more political. They may take certain passages out of context to justify what they're doing, but the overwhelming majority of Muslims or people, there's very vocal contingent disagreeing with what they're saying and what they're doing.
I think that Islam has been misunderstood and misinterpreted by its own followers. There are a number of verses from Holy Book of Qur'an which have been interpreted by those misguided Muslims, by those bad practitioners of the faith, as being more like cult, being more like terrorists. I have a problem with all this misinterpretation of a peaceful religion to show the aggressive side, aggressive parts of it. And I'm sure, as again it is with any other book, religious book that you go and read, you can get positiveness out of it and you can get negativeness. It all depends what you are looking for. A small example would be the way Taliban in Afghanistan had interpreted Islam. It was to fit their agenda, which was to control people and really to abuse people. Iranian government right now, it's really, they are one of the biggest abusers of human rights, but they are calling themselves Islamic nation. And to me, because I do believe in Islam, I do believe in intention of true Islam and Prophet Muhammad, to me it's clear that they are misusing their political agenda to control people. So what we see here in the United States is really a political Islam versus a spiritual Islam. It has 114 chapters, and some of the chapters, it all depends how you interpret them. They could actually contradict one another. So if you can find something to fit your agenda, then you always go with that particular interpretation.
And the Quran's much early, you know, it's much newer. It's written in the, 7th century. So it's not that old. Well, it's still pretty old. But it's 1,300 years. You know, the world has changed a lot in 1,300 years. So whether you think the Quran is a peaceful book or a book of war, I think it's neither. And we now use it to justify myriad atrocities on both sides. We all say we're peaceful people, you know? We all say we want peace. George Bush said he wants peace. You know, Adolf Hitler said he wanted peace. The Arab world is just as guilty of that as we are, because they know that it's a tool. And you can fool a lot of people with that. And you can bend minds with that.
I have talked and discussed with many of my highly educated Muslim friends, men and women, who all agree that there is a great disparity in the text as it is written and as it is practiced. But we all hesitate to come forward to ask publicly and without ambiguity the question of why we, as good followers of an ancient religion which has its foundations in social justice and equality for all, do not remove these misinterpreted interpretations of those verses which have been used to justify oppressing, in particular, women.
During 2008-2009, I was a TSO, a Transportation Security Officer, at the Buffalo Niagara International Airport. Some of the things that would happen frequently at the airport would be that people would profile individuals who were coming through that were coming from Middle Eastern countries. The whole family would come through And women would often wear the full burqa, or, you know, at least some sort of a head covering from wherever, you know, whatever their religious belief dictated. Or people would start getting a little tense about it. You could just tell from the way other screeners were reacting. Their movements would change, the way that they would present themselves would change. Sort of, you know, security was heightened, or you could just tell that people were getting really nervous about individuals coming in. It was especially difficult with women because if they had the full burqa with the full face covering, it was difficult because we would have to take them to a private screening area just to see their face to be able to verify their passport. They would seem to feel like they were being violated. The women were very timid when they were coming through, and I felt sympathy for them. Other people really wouldn't care, or, you know, the first thing that comes into their mind is terrorist. But overall, there was a very negative connotation of the people that were coming through.
There's a temple right around the corner from me here. And, I mean, the women wear their burqas out cutting the grass because there's houses all around them that they rent, and they're out in full burqa. Some of them just wear the veil. Some are more extreme. I don't know what that's based on. I don't know if that's a lot of them make that choice, especially here when they're living in a Western society. They make that choice that they want to be completely modest and not even show their lips, their ankles, their wrists. But many of them are more liberated and wear just the veil. One other time my friend came up, she was doing an exhibit called The Other America. So we headed to Lackawanna, where they had the Lackawanna 7, and then it went up to 13 or something. I don't remember how many people were involved, whether they were terrorists or had been trained as terrorists, or it was just a misunderstanding. I can't remember the outcome of it. But I went over there with my friend, the woman whom we went through 9/11 with together. And because there's mosques in Lackawanna, and I was born there. So we found the mosques, and we kind of like loitered until there was some activity, and we went up, and the women did not want their pictures taken. Although I managed to get a few and took pictures of their hands, which were hennaed. And they let me take pictures of their hands. They didn't have burqas on, but they had the long robes and veils. But they didn't want their portraits done because we wanted to do proper portraits of them.
When I first married my wife, she didn't cover. She didn't cover at all. And as we became more and more, you know, religious, I didn't mandate to her that she cover. She felt that she wanted to. And a lot of people look at it as her being submissive, but I equate it to like a nun. A Catholic nun covers for modesty, but no one says anything. As she's gotten more and more into her religion, she's become more and more modest, until the point where she wears an abaya. When she goes out, she doesn't wear American clothes. She wears a full abaya, which is a very loose-fitting gown. And she's just decided to wear a niqab. So she goes out, and she for most of the time, she goes out and she wears a full niqab.
I've known a few. Some were just ordinary African American women who joined the Muslim community because their husbands were in jail, and they took to wearing the veil because the Muslim community is extremely supportive of their members. And they had a lot of children, and they needed food, and they needed a community. So I knew several women that joined the Muslim religion to be part of their community. I guess if you're a woman and you know it's out there that you can have, and you can't have that, but you want it, then you are oppressed. But if you know about it, but you don't want to have that, then and you accept it, then I guess it's freedom within your own mind. But if you can't break free of it and you want the freedom, then it is oppression.
I believe that hijab came to protect women in mid-6th centuries. I believe there are 3 or 4 verses directly about women covering their head. As I truly believe that Prophet Muhammad was a feminist. Prophet Muhammad brought number of freedom to women, which was unheard of in the rest of the world. The issue of hijab, if we go with the intention of it, I don't believe hijab is mandatory. Hijab came to protect women, to help them to move around without being molested in 6 centuries, without attracting attention from man and without being harassed. Now, if we take that intention and bring it here to Buffalo, New York in 21st century, would you be harassed if you are dressed like you and me? I don't believe so. Would you be harassed if you are fully covered, including, covering your face and covering your hair? I believe you will be harassed. I think that we have to see if that style of clothing for women bring them freedom or really make them more oppressed, because if a woman truly believes, Muslim woman, that she has to be covered from head to toe, and as a result of that she cannot go out, she cannot participate in the normal everyday activity in Buffalo, New York, she's going to be sitting at home. If I go to Afghanistan and I'm going to remote areas in Afghanistan outside of the capital, would I dress the way I dress in Buffalo, New York? No. I would dress the way that would fit the culture and the environment and the atmosphere in Afghanistan today, so I can move around easily without being harassed and without being bothered by man.
O mankind, we have created you from a single pair of man and women. That you may recognize one another. Not that you may despise each other. In the sight of God. Is the best in conduct.